Hello, everybody. It is Sil the DM coming with you with a campaign recap for the city, October 24th, 2019. The session I chose the title Sombre de Baile, the one-man show. Now, with the Inevitables moving towards the front line under the commands of Kovalin, our intrepid idiots decide to follow through with the suggestion that they should go to the forge of Gru-lak Thren, a full-blooded orc smith who was renowned throughout the city, and was busy working away at the adamantine they had acquired. As they picked their way through the back streets and alleys, under the fearsome blasts of the archfiend crashing against the much smaller magical barrier being generated by the mayor, there was a moment where Rickle, foreseeing his potential mortality, handed off the bag of holding to Levy, the group's primary healer. They come to the forge, a large L-shaped building with a black picket fenced off section at the rear, dotted with large barrels and small external forges used for training. Around the building there is 20 feet of clearance from the forge to the road, and 50 feet of clearance from it and the buildings around it, giving the party a pretty large area that they need to protect from an incoming attack. Deciding to get inside, to see if the people inside would need any help at the forge itself, they swung around the front door getting into the building. Inside, they saw a small front desk and a pair of waiting chairs. The sound of the forge was so loud that it could be heard outside through the stone walls of the building, as the fire inside was roaring with an intensity that a forge normally wouldn't produce. Beyond the front desk there was a massive wall of small square drawers, labeled differently in many different languages, perfectly laid out floor to ceiling, the wall of shelves being so large it actually continued out of the room through a bead curtain that led to the forge proper. After waiting for a moment, noticing that the front lobby was empty, the group discussed poking into the forge to try and get someone's attention, when a human, probably in his mid-20s, wearing a heavy leather apron, sweat-stained work clothes, and elbow-length leather gloves, sprinted into the room through the beads. The stranger began rapidly scanning the small drawers, looking for something specific on the large wall, his back to the party. When he had finally found it and grabbed what he came for, he turned to the forge and noticed the party. Shit. Can I help you? He stuttered, looking them over, hoping they weren't there to kill him, the crashing of the archfiend echoing above, even over the roar of the forge. After quickly explaining that they were here to help protect the forge, the apprentice, whose name they never got a chance to learn, more relaxed, was about to head back into the forge carrying a soft hunk of gold in his hand that he had pulled out of the drawer. The party at this point was discussing how best to defend the place, and Rickle, the paladin, declared confidently that whatever comes through those doors he'd cut down. To which the apprentice, as he was running back into the forge, called out, "If you could kill them before they get to the doors, that would be greatly appreciated," which elicited some chuckles from the group, and gave Rickle a solid "you right" moment. Pouring themselves back outside, the party debated how best to cover the large building, and protect it as effectively as possible, eventually deciding that Siren, Kovalin, and her eidolon, Basiri, along with Rickle, would fan out into the shoulder of the L-shaped building by the front door, giving them all three a view down 3 of the 4 roads of the intersection that the forge sits on. While the remaining players, Zon, Darnik, and Levy, would take the back alleys. Midnight, the Tabaxi rogue, would get onto the roof and provide cover with his short bow. On his way to the back, Zon, wanting to protect the basilisk egg he was carrying, looked for a place to put it, finding a large barrel of fine white sand by the external forges. Approaching, he also noticed that the snow around the back left of the building had melted away from the heat of the forge sipping through the stone walls. While digging a quick hole in the barrel, large enough for the egg, Zon decided to take a moment to pray to his family's deity, Kalios, the elven goddess of nature. As you dig a hole in the fine white sand, you feel an intense tugging at your skin, like a gentle but very present pulling, as if it's tearing, forming like a tear forming along your flesh. As you watch, the scar that covers a large part of your chest begins to spread, a new scar tearing its way down the length of your forearms to meet with your wrist. When the scar finally makes its way to the wrist, you see that the sand beneath your hand begins to shimmer and swell before glowing black. Once you had a hole large enough for your egg, you hesitantly lower it into the now black sands, and as if out of your controls, your hands go about methodically covering the egg with the black sand. Unnerved by this, but confident that the egg would be protected, Zahn returned back to the other three where they were standing, and occasionally glancing back, towards the barrel. Concerned, Zahn brought up what had happened to Levy and Darek, who both looked to the sand and confirmed for Zahn that the sand was still white, as far as they could see. But they both did notice that the scar had, in fact, traveled down both of his arms. Oh, and we have a cute picture of Zahn by Zahn's player in his winter gear. You can see a bit of the scar on his face. The first hour, as the group was on watch, not much happened. The battle still seemed pretty separate from them, and the constant beating of the archfiend did little damage to the barrier that they could tell. During the second hour, however, Levy and Zahn managed to catch a glimpse of movement and prepare themselves for a potential fight. A group of orcs, basically one-to-one with the party, came into view, divided around the building. 3 to the road on the southwest, far away from anyone in the party. 2 came into sight at the back alley by Zahn, Levy, and Darnik, their bows drawn and ready to fire. A third appeared on the roof of the 2-story building to the west of the forge, and a 7th orc popped out of a window in the building across the street to the east. I'll spare you the play-by-play of combat, which, to be fair, ate up a solid amount of time. Our sessions are only roughly 4 hours long, and before you add into how long it can take to get us started, and the fun we have joking around and teasing one another, so a large, spread-out combat can eat a lot of the session's time. I will, however, give a highlight reel of the good stuff. A lot of the members of the party ended up getting fairly banged up, including Midnight and Levy, who took a few ranged attacks before the combat became a melee. Siren wild shape into a big bear to charge the building as Kovalin and sent Basiri and a pair of summoned lantern archons after it as well. The orc in the building, seeing that it was now under siege, decided to suicide dive from the 2nd floor with its 2-handed sword, carving a deep wound into Basiri, the serpentine eidolon, and breaking its own leg at the time. Reichel, who had managed to get into melee with 2 of the orcs as they charged around the corner, melted one of his attackers with a powerful hellish rebuke. But one of the orcs had managed to run past him as the others got into melee, pushing into the forge. Midnight, reacting to this, dove off the roof to take a shot at the orc now inside the building, but missed wildly, hitting the other of the 2 main doors. Kovalin, fearing what the orc might do inside, sent a message to the apprentice they had met earlier to warn him. During all this, Zahn had jumped up onto the picket fence in the back of the building, as Darnik and Levy together dispatched the other 2 orcs in the alley, Darnik using his Dragon's Breath spell, and Levy unleashing a flurry of guiding bolts. Zahn then proceeded to toss the spear that they had been given from the bag of holding earlier, and skewered the archer orc on the roof in the head. Siren shredded the last of the orcs outside with just a rending bear attack. And then they heard a voice inside, jeez, fucking hell, followed by the twang of a powerfully heavy crossbow, the orc that had run inside the being launched out from the building. The apprentice, however, who had no familiarity with the weapon, ended up dislocating his shoulder in the act. Rickle ran in to heal the man who had collapsed in the pain of the dislocated shoulder, being relocated forcibly by magic. After a little bit of fucking around, he ended up waking back up and went back into the forge to continue his work, thanking them for the help and setting the crossbow aside. Rickle tried to follow the apprentice into the forge to call out to him and was seared by the supernatural heat that was powering the forge. A blast so hot it singed away his eyebrows, dealing a solid 10 fire damage to his face and stealing the air from his lungs. After which he decided to leave the forge alone for now. It was so bright and orange, in fact, that he couldn't even see into the forge when he poked his head through the beads. It was like a supernatural supernova inside. Recovering a bit from their wounds, Zahn called to Midnight to see if he could scale the building to the west and recover the spear that he had thrown. Feeling naked without a proper weapon, and with Midnight as a tabaxi having a climbing speed, the building should prove no problem. However, what they found on top of the roof was another story. As you acrobatically pull yourself up onto the roof, Midnight, you see the body of the dead orc, Zon's spear impaled through its skull. But you are not alone. Across from the orc, 10 feet away from you, is a cloaked figure, crouched low. So low you couldn't see it from the lower roof of the forge. Its hood looks up at you, and even with your superior dark vision, you cannot see through the shadow of the hood, as if there was some supernatural force at play, preventing even your demon eyes from seeing through it. Though your keen eyes catch a glimpse of black flesh in the 4 centimeter gap between the thing's glove and armor. It speaks in a deep, lilting voice, the words echoing out in Undercommon. I had hoped this would have gone smoother. Before you can respond to the figure, it dashes back 5 feet, a pair of shining, well-crafted daggers appearing as if materialized into its hands. It tosses both of them at you as it begins to jump backwards, its legs disappearing as if it's gliding just above the surface of the roof. Midnight, with his cat-like reflexes and well-trained eye, dodged to the side of the first dagger and managed to pull his own, the sentient blade Reichiji, up to parry the second out of the air. And as you do this, the figure curls. With its hands, it pushes off the roof, a full 15 feet of clearance. It twirls, spinning acrobatically before landing on the other side of the roof, a full 45 feet away from you, a fresh pair of daggers in its hands. Fleeing from this new strange threat, and abandoning the spear still lodged in the heavy orc archer, Midnight decided to tumble from the 35-foot roof and called out to his companions to warn them, all the while concerned and distracted by the lilting to the figure's undercommon. An echoing sound that he seemed to recognize but couldn't quite place. Which then started possibly one of the most out-of-the-box boss fights I've probably ever run in D&D 5e. The cloak figure began to appear all over the grounds of the forge, throwing daggers at a urinating Reichel, tried to trip the paladin as he rushed to get his friends, dipping in and out of shadows like he was phasing through walls. This figure jumped in and out of the shadows, throwing daggers at anyone he could catch off guard, until appearing at the top of the roof, ready to attack again. "Why are you doing this?" Levy called up to the cloaked figure looming over them from above the roof, standing close to the hot part of the chimney. The figure looked down at them, still standing, though many of them still had wounds from the earlier encounter with the orcs and now its own daggers. "If it was up to me, you wouldn't be here," the figure replied, its voice echoing out in Undercommon. This time, Midnight's memory triggered. You remember hearing that voice before many times, not just an accent or a lilt to the way it forms the words of Undercommon, but the entirety of the voice. You recognize the voice of Istor, the ringmaster of your circus, the man who had taken you in all those years ago, gave you a place to live, a job to earn your keep, the figure who had been like a father to you in the absence of your own. Midnight froze, the realization dawning on them, crushing like a hammer through glass. Why are you doing this?" you call out to the man who was like a father to you, your voice breaking a bit as you look up at the shadowed figure. It meets your gaze. The answer to your question comes in a form of a pair of daggers as they sink themselves into your chest, nearly dropping you with the force of the blow. Looking up from the dagger's back to the man Istor, you see his pose as he threw the blades, a pose you had seen many times before as he stood in the center of the ring, hyping the crowd for the performance to come. Then the figure fell back into shadows, disappearing out of sight to continue its onslaught. At this point in the fight developed into full force. The shadowed figure, the dark elf Istor, seemed able to disappear and teleport in and out of shadows, using this ability to jump from each side of the forge to the other, harassing the two split-up groups, eventually some of them getting skilled enough at reacting to its presence and getting quick to attack it before it had a chance to retreat. It also became evident that it would, every so often, disappear for a while, giving them time to catch their breath, usually a single round. Jumping out of Rickel's shadow, the paladin dodged the first of the two blade strikes, but the second fell down through its collarbone, sinking the human, dropping him to the ground. As Midnight directed his shadow to attack his store, it missed him, providing an ample opportunity for it to fall back into the shadow attacking it, teleporting away. Another dagger found its way into the wounded Reichel, almost killing the man before Levi managed to pour a healing spell into him. Appearing again after briefly harassing Siren and Kovalin with more daggers, actually taking a sizable amount of damage from Siren's flaming blade spell. Reacting to this ever-present threat quickly, Midnight shot one of the party's magical arrows, sinking it into the Shadow's shoulder, where it looked down at the magical arrow, its feathering a red, white, and black. It grasped it and drew a powerful arcane magic from the arrow before snapping it like a twig, producing two more daggers that now bear the same color pattern as the arrow's fletching. Now enhanced with powerful magical daggers, Istor continued to assault, ending up, after dealing more damage to the group, taking a powerful dagger throw as he hit an ally to recharge his energy. Zod, who had rushed him and tossed the dagger into the alley, ended up coming to blows with the figure, an actual fistfight dissolving, where he managed to punch Zod pretty soundly in the face before Zod returned their own flurry of blows, before he was able to recharge his ability to teleport. Driven now to weakness, and with the Deep Nose setting a torch on the ground opposite side of the building to reduce the amount of shadows, limiting his options to re-engage that particular group, as well as re-summoning her Eidolon, Basiri, Istor, who was quite wounded from the reactions that had managed to get through his shadowy defense, appeared beside the barrel where he had seen Zod bury the egg earlier. Freezing in panic, Zod watched in horror as the Dark Elf went to plunge the dagger into the sand, which would undoubtedly pierce the egg. When the sand, that was still black as far as he could see, but white to everyone else, surged and bubbled, barely passing his reflex save, or dexterity saving throw. Istor dove to the side as the sand exploded out of the seams of the barrel to form steel-hard spikes. Not able to avoid all of the damage, he found himself reeling, his shadowy form beginning to falter as Rickle jumped the fence intending to rush the Dark Elf, his sword in both hands, shield tossed to the ground. But Dardic got there first. Having recast his dragon's breath onto himself earlier, he unleashed a brutal lightning breath weapon, and a fumbled dexterity save had the Dark Elf blasted against the wall of the forge. Unable to bear the force of the bolt, it ripped through the elf, killing him and ending the fight, with many of the characters still heavily wounded. The mystical sand protected the egg again, forming a full shield around the barrel during the wrath of the lightning. So much so that not even a drop of blood made it to the barrel. With the battle behind them, and the sounds of battle drifting away save for the thunder of the archfiend's bashing on the barrier, the group noticed that the sound of the hot forge had changed. No longer was it the roaring fire of a supernaturally heated furnace, but instead the constant, rhythmic singing of a hammer striking metal, though with a speed edging on the superhuman. This is a picture of Istor that Midnight did. Clearly not in his armor, however. As they rested and licked their wounds, the apprentices, that's a hard word, filed out of the forge, exhausted. Spent and burned heavily from their time in the forge, they made their way to a nearby house to collapse inside, in an effort to weather out the rest of the battle. The young smith, who had manned the heavy crossbow, collapsing by the main door to the forge. Hours passed, and the sound of Gru-lak's hammer never ceased. The battles continued to rage out of eyesight, and the ever-present shadow of the archfiend, the beast known as Sin, circled and prowled around the barrier, bashing fiercely, trying to find a weak point. Then the sound of the hammer fell silent. Your eyes linger on the building, concerned as to what was going on inside. It had been over 5 hours since the fight with Istor, a full 7 hours since you had all made it to the forge proper. With a creak, the back door opens. Hot air causing steam as the cool winter air meets the dense air of the forge. Gru-lak, the full-blooded orc, in his blacksmith apron limps out into the clearing. His body is burned, drenched in sweat, blood, and soot, the stump of his right leg gashed and bleeding horribly, rubbed raw against the prosthetic he used to balance himself. In his hands, a pair of brilliant, steaming adamantine longswords, the blades perfect twins of one another, though beautiful and masterfully made, are unadorned, empty shells awaiting the soul of the archfiend. Raising the blades up, wincing from the pain in his arms and the weight being pushed onto his injured leg, the burly orc snarled against the wounds to speak. "It is done!" he bellowed, a proud craftsman on the verge of collapse, holding his prize high. And just as the party was beginning to feel hope, revealed that the blades had been finished without any more troubles, there came another crashing blow of the archfiend's fist above, and the barrier shattered into nothingness. And that was the end of our session. I hope you had fun following along with me, trying a new thing where I mix in fairly accurate retellings of what I actually did in session, and actually mix in some of the roleplay that the players did. I know I probably switched perspective from third and second person in some of them. I'm still trying to get this format down right. As always, I want to thank our artist who provided art today. I believe I only used art today from Midnight and Zon's players. So thank you again, guys, for all your delightful art. And of course, on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the 6 current members of the party, minus Siren, as Siren joined after that particular piece of art was made. Though we're working on getting art of Siren, that son of a bitch. I want to thank you all for coming by, and I hope you look forward to more updates from this group. Have yourself a great day.